Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time today to talk about the G.91Y. One of the interesting things I decided to do during the Act 3 event was to play a bunch of the Hungarian vehicles. I ended up spading the IO-10, the Tu-2, the Act 9P, the IO-28, the MiG-15 BIS, and the MiG-17 PF. But what ended up happening after I spaded the MiG-17 PF, I didn't actually have enough research to move on to the MiG-21 MF. So I decided, well, why not just play something else in the tech tree to get that researched? And that's what I did, and that choice was the G.91Y. What ended up happening as well is I researched the MiG-21 MF and the BIS AU at the same time with the Y, which was pretty cool. And I had a fantastic experience in the G91. I was super worried about it, because the fact is, the G91YS specifically was in such a horrific position for so many years, and after the BR changes, it was looking a little bit more promising than before, and then they moved down the G91Y to 9.0, and I was like, you know what, maybe this thing could actually work now. Maybe it could get out of that horrific 10-3 matchmaking, which, you know, kind of annihilates a lot of vehicles at higher BRs. And the G91Y, the difference between this and the YS, the main one, at least from an aerialistic point of view, is the YS gets access to AIM-9Bs, but also at the same time, there is no other real massive differences between them. So it's not going to like change your perspective on how you play it. The only thing is you have the setup missiles with the two AIM-9Bs, and the AIM-9Bs are rank 4, so yeah, kind of a pain. But the G91Y doesn't have that. Instead, it has a slightly lower BR, and also a much easier way of grinding it. So why is the Y so much nicer to play than the YS? The simple fact is with that lower BR, you can actually face much better matchmaking. 10-0 in War Thunder doesn't really exist in there. It hasn't for the longest time. There's only really one nation that has a bunch of 10-0s, and that's America. It has stuff like the FAU-2, of course, the F4C, and also, I believe, one of the A-10s is at 10-0 nowadays. And the problem with that is the fact that if you have a black hole at 10-0, that means a lot of the matchmaking between 9-7 and 8-7, 9-3 or 8-3, then also 10-3 and 9-3 is pretty explosive because you don't have that balancing area between them. So the G91Y massively benefits from this, meaning that most of the time you are actually playing at 9-3, 8-3 or 9-7 and 8-7. And as a vehicle which has pretty good maneuverability, decent speed, you're able to deal with all the vehicles there. There isn't really anything I felt afraid of. There was, of course, some similar vehicles that you see around the place all the time, like F104s, for example. But it's not as if the F104s, you know, could kill the G91Y, because all you have to do is turn a little bit and be able to know how to defensively fly, and then you can go after other stuff, and you'll have a great time with it. So it was quite easy to manage those general areas. Just to give you an idea of how easy it was to play this vehicle and how nice this BR range is right now for the G91Y, we ended up going, while spading it, 15 battles. Okay, so it took 15 battles to spade, 93% win rate, so lost one battle in 15, and 42 air kills, 3 deaths. So, didn't really die in the thing either. We're just kind of farming people at the end of the day. Because, as I said, the matchmaking was so nice. Now, I've got to be honest, earlier on when I was playing the MiG-17 PF for Hungary, we had similar stats. 18 battles, 72% win rates, 41 air kills, 4 deaths. So it isn't just the G91Y that I was doing well with, but at the same time, the matchmaking around this just felt really nice to play. And all I've got to say is I feel really sorry for stuff like A4s. A4s really need a BR balancing nowadays. That new system they're bringing in the new update needs to come in for vehicles like that, because obviously in ground the A4s are very good, but in air right now they are just punching bags, and it is absolutely horrific for them. Same with stuff like the G91, the standard ones. There is no reason why those vehicles should be 0.3 BR away from this. So after all the BR changes where they moved down a lot of vehicles from 8.7 to 8.3, it actually ended up benefiting the G91Y, because it also went down in BR, but it also means it faces a lot of those 8.3 vehicles that people are playing, and the G.91Y just wipes the floor with them. There are a few issues that you have to think about, though. This vehicle does have two DEFAs, the 30mm, and people always talk about not liking the DEFAs. I've generally thought they're okay, especially when you compare them to a few of the other guns around this BR, but I get that they're not as good as the Vulcan. You know, the main issue with these DEFAs is they don't have a ton of ammo, so you do have to be careful on your shots, and if you want to like carry games, get 4 and 5 kills, you do have to make sure to do quick bursts and know the muzzle velocity and accuracy of the guns, and that can be sometimes annoying, especially if you're trying to hit somebody in a perpendicular or hit somebody in a different setup. But it can still work and you can still do really well with it as long as the aiming goes good. But yeah, 250 rounds can be a limiting factor, and also at the same time, when you don't have some of the engine upgrades, the plane feels pretty fat to accelerate in kind of like the mid speeds that you fight at, so basically 400 to 800, and that means that if you do get engaged upon, it can be quite hard to get away and reset. But once you get those engine upgrades and stuff like that, you are completely fine. Now, one of the great things about this vehicle is it has a ton of secondary modifications, which for aerialistic are kind of worthless. Obviously, in ground, these things will be really nice. Another difference between, by the way, the YS and the Y is the YS has access to CCIP for the cannons, rockets, and bombs, whereas the Y doesn't. So if you do use this as a CAS aircraft in ground, which you can do because Italy has a really nice 9.0 lineup right now, just understand you're going to be doing it blind, but also it does have the AS-30s, which is quite fun, so maybe you could give those a go and have a good time. But the fact is, in aerialistic, when you are at about 40% spaded, you have all of the flight performance modifications you need. So from an aerialistic point of view, you are good to go. Like, the flight performance modifications are actually a smaller part of the overall grind than all of the other bombs and rockets and all of that stuff that's there. And this is something I talked about with the TU2, right? The TU2 has like 10 or 11 different sets of bombs that you can bring, but it only has one modification. With the G.91Y, there are 4 modifications for its bombs, 2 modifications for rockets, and 3 modifications for missiles, and 1 modification for the firebombs. And this means that it lowers the modification cost of a bunch of the other modifications, meaning that it's easier to be able to grind out the vehicle itself, and you are fully combat effective when you're only about 40% through the vehicle. So this means the vast majority of the time you're actually playing this to spade it, you are in a position where your vehicle has its full characteristics in its flight, which is not the case with a lot of other vehicles which don't have a ton of these different secondary armament modifications, which is why whenever modifications get added to a vehicle and they're not seen as kind of useful or they're a bit superfluous, a lot of people get annoyed because it's like, oh, well, I have to, spade this thing, I have to get these mods. But what you have to understand is it makes the useful mods for a vehicle, useful in quotes obviously, it makes the useful mods of a vehicle cheaper. So it means that your overall grind is actually a better experience. Like when they added the dozer blades to a lot of vehicles, it meant that it lowered the modification cost for a bunch of the other useful modifications, and that is something to think about. And with the G.91Y, this is a great example of this. So by the time you're halfway through doing it, you are a full banger. You have every mod that you need, and you can just hammer people. And it just feels great. It was a really, really nice time. Now, balance-wise, is this thing balanced? No, because as I said, 10.0 isn't a BR, so you don't have matchmaking which is fair around it. Like, you don't have the fact that you get up tiered, you just basically get down tiered or play out your tier, and that a lot of people would say is balanced, but it does create unbalance in different areas. So as a vehicle itself, it's a menace to 8.3 and 8.7s and also 8.0s. If you ever see an 8.0 in this thing, just run. You're not going to be able to fight it. It's faster than you, more maneuverable than you. It can do whatever it wants to you. And in a lot of situations, I was able just to clap people with it. So just be very careful with a vehicle like against this. So yeah, it's one of those vehicles which is not balanced in the game. It does not fit at its BR. But the main thing to understand is that's this whole BR bracket. This whole BR bracket is just all over the place at the moment, and until the next update comes in, until they can start balancing by actual game mode in terms of BR, then nothing's going to change. So maybe in a month's time, this thing might not be as good as it is, but right now, it's a gem. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Gixie, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wharton Dare, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.